Merry Christmas and welcome back to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. Scott, Kyle, and Craig, getting started with myself.
Scott, Kyle, and Craig.
Somehow I feel like I will mess up our names, and it's really like a pause point.
It's like the soundtrack in your mind.
Yeah. I try to help
Messes
people
with
know
you.
who you can expect to hear on the podcast in these voices that are mysterious. We are in this series soundtrack, and one of the soundtracks that I have that I don't like is
And
because we're in the world where
that you hear when you hear other
I
people speak.
No, I hear myself.
Oh, when you okay.
Yeah, I don't like it about myself. I am going to try on this podcast not to say
Now I'm just gonna think about it, hear it from you, and I'm gonna probably say it.
Get a buzzer out, get like the taboo buzzer or something.
Chet Holmgren. Holmgren. Why
Did
can't I
you
say
do any
that?
mouth warm-up
why
exercises
can't
this
I say
morning?
that?
Holmgren.
Holmgren.
2 syllables.
For his post interview from the Zags the other night, he said it like every other word. Yeah, it was a really good game, and I'm really proud of our team, and it's just been really great to see the development. I'm like, bro,
Yep.
Yeah.
We have
I do know.
The
I
PR team's going to help him out with that.
I watched the game, bro. I know.
He's not in high school anymore. He's an adult. He's trying to go get a career. They'll help him out. They'll be like, listen back on this one.
You
What do
know?
you hear?
You know?
You know?
we all have habits like that in our enunciation, and I am indebted to a public speaking teacher that I had in school way back in the day, who actually was almost like she was very militant about that. After you got done with a speech, and you thought, "Oh, that was awesome! I did really good," she would critique every time you said and fur, and
Fur?
yeah, it's not tuh, it's to, to.
Right.
Because we say tuh and fur. And you start focusing on it, and you realize, oh my gosh, we really do have bad habits.
Yeah.
And then you start noticing it in other people.
Right. And that's one of the beauties of this series soundtracks is we're becoming more aware of ourselves and hopefully others, but not in a real critical way, but a helpful way. But I'm becoming more as I hear myself say things and I'm in conversation. Where we were just having a conversation with somebody right before we pushed record on this podcast, and they were like, well, that's the way life goes. That's the way it is. And I was, agreeable but then I was like, and I literally said out loud, like, no, it can change. People can change. Like, it seems like it's not going to change because that's their MO. Mm-hmm. But no, hearing those soundtracks, I don't want to find myself. So for us, since we speak a lot, that's recorded, podcast, messages, whether it's even just a short, I'm doing a welcome on a Sunday morning or a giving time. Like, there's a lot. I watch myself back.
A lot.
It's the only way to get real feedback. Because what you think happened, and when other people are like, no, it was good, it was great. And then you watch it back or listen to it back, like, ah.
Yeah,
So-
that's what we did in our preaching practicum class, is we had to give a message in front of the class, and they would record it on a VHS tape.
A VHS
Yeah.
tape. You're not that old.
I
are
know,
you?
No
but that's-
way. What?
they- I don't-
Which
they
is just
didn't-
old technology.
Yeah, they
couldn't
didn't have the
upgrade.
technology to do, I don't
This
know,
is early
digital.
2000s.
Yeah. And you had to buy, part of your class, you had to buy books, you had to buy a VHS tape. And and you had to go to like the deep, dark back room of the library to watch it. It was the only place that had a VHS. Yeah, again, I'm like, why couldn't we do that digitally? I don't know. And then you had to watch yourself on the VHS. And it's the same thing.
That's painful.
They
by the
would,
way.
your teacher would critique you and your class would critique you. Like, hey, this didn't work super well. Or you said this. And when you get that critique, you're like, it wasn't that bad, was it? Right? Like, I thought I did better. And then you go back, watch it back, and you're like, oh, man, that was terrible. They were right. Like, I remember vividly one girl was like, it was kind of distracting. You kept touching your face. And I was like, yeah, I had kind of a runny nose from I remember. And I'm like, but it wasn't that bad. And then I watch it back, and I'm like touching my face every 3 seconds. I'm like, dude, stop touching your face.
Quit. Get a hanky. Pause.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things with soundtracks that's helpful. We're talking about this. The series is what's on repeat in your mind. These thoughts, the ideas about life and others and who God is and how life works. And we just create these grooves. We create these sayings. And sometimes they're decades old or generationally
Absolutely.
old. And,
Yep.
and in a positive way, that's good. And maybe it'll be like, hey, this is we're laying hands is, or this is our household, and we don't do that. We treat each other with kindness and respect. That's what we do, and we have that soundtrack running through.
I remember in the early days of my marriage to your mother, I encountered her soundtracks and realized how different hers were from mine. In particular, just in regard to just her relationship with the Lord and life and the future. So whenever I'd find myself worrying, fretting over something because I was anxious or I wasn't sure how it was going to work out, and is it going to work out, and I started getting into that, she would just say, like, I just believe God's going to take care of it. And it used to annoy me because I thought, well, that's because you're not dealing with the facts. I'm dealing with the facts. You're just in la-la land. But she was actually right, of course. And it was because she just had that soundtrack. Her relationship to the Lord and her outlook on life was just a whole lot different. And she helped me tremendously.
It's good. Are you guys laying handses or are you laying hands?
Laying hands is.
Laying
Yeah.
hands is.
Is.
It's correct either way, but I say laying hands is.
Yeah, we don't, the laying hands,
Hands
hands is.
Is it Jesus or Jesus is?
Jesus is skateboard.
Well, Kyle, I don't know if you know this, but there's only one Jesus.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Well, possessive. Is it Jesus' blood or is it Jesus' blood?
So I'm going to try to move us along here. So he has all the blood. It's his blood. Anyways, so the reason part of why I don't like the and is not just for the technical fluency and sounding more professional or just more eloquent. It's the fact that I know I do it when my mouth is running a little bit faster than my brain.
I was just thinking that.
And it's my, hey, let's keep this thing going. And sometimes it's in an effort, one, I enjoy conversation, I enjoy talking, but sometimes it's in an effort not to breathe in the conversation and not let anybody else jump into the conversation. So, do you have something going on there?
Apparently, my watch is ringing.
You got an important phone call? Are you trying to interrupt me?
Not
make
that
a
important.
point about
I silenced my
point?
phone, but I did not silence my watch.
Man, all right.
Oh my gosh.
So I know at times it's just like keep talking and then and you just don't know what I'm gonna say next, but I'm just gonna keep the motor running. And did your phone just go off?
Yeah.
What is? Are you guys on a text thread together?
The important people are, trying to reach us.
Mute that group conversation here. We're kind of doing a thing right now. So I know it's deeper than, for me, it's deeper than just a filler word and saying or and which is annoying on just surface level. That's when you hear, what is that kid? 18, 19, Chet Holm.
Yeah,
And you're like,
18,
oh,
yeah, 19.
yeah, dude, you haven't done a lot of public speaking before, and you're just kind of like,
Yeah, you give somebody like that a pass.
Yeah, a national audience is watching with the camera in your face. And you just got done playing a game. And
But he's going to have to grow quick.
Oh, for sure.
Because he's not going to get interviews
yeah,
unless it becomes a shtick like Marshawn Lynch.
just hear some.
Where that guy's incredibly intelligent, and then he had this public persona of like a thug, but he was just working it. Like
Yeah.
he knew what to do. So it's deeper than that for me. It's the mouth is running, the brain's not quite there. I get excited about talking, sharing something. I can see Kyle wants to jump in, so I'm just going to keep talking. So there's no breathing room.
That's good self-awareness, Scott.
Well, that's part of this whole soundtrack
Absolutely.
thing. And it comes up because I'm checking the podcast, make sure it, when it goes out, make sure it's there, it sounds right, the audio levels it between us, which let's just go a little pat on the back here. We've been doing it pretty good on the audio train.
And
lately.
by we, you mean you.
No, you help. You give me feedback.
A little
We
bit.
tweak things. We
Yeah.
put some threshold and gate and things on the board. I don't know.
You're learning.
We're
Sound
learning.
engineering.
We're making it happen. There's been some bad episodes.
Yes.
And some people
Like with
have
the one that
listened
you
through.
forgot to record. That one was pretty bad.
that were just the camera audio.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's bad.
That's like just skip that episode, whatever number that is. I couldn't listen to it.
Some people have listened. Amy, out of last week, my wife was like, I think I've listened to every episode. You guys were talking about that.
Wow.
So
People will come
and
up
she-
to me and sometimes I forget. We share the same stories in meetings and different stuff, and I'll forget. Like, oh yeah, I shared that story on the podcast. Some people will go, hey, I heard. Do you remember that story you were telling about this and that? And it's like, what?
She's like, when did I tell
Yeah.
you about
I
that?
don't remember telling you. Oh, it was on the podcast. Gotcha.
That's right. So let's jump in your soundtracks, and we're wrapping up the series this Sunday, and so we can dive into that content as well. But the 4 weeks we've talked about soundtrack, what's on repeat in your mind, just this big idea, but then about ourselves and how we think about ourselves and have all of this, self-thought and self-talk that's good in some ways, it's godly in some ways, but then also a lot of ways harmful, not helpful. We talked about our soundtrack about others. I talked a lot about the Good Samaritan and the cultural biases we have. Then Craig, this last week, you just talked about life. Like our conversation right before we push record, we're like, well, that's just the way it is.
That's just the way life is. Yep.
And you kind of resigning yourself for like, yep,
It's not going to get any better than this.
Lord willing, we've got a few more decades going here. That's just the way it's going to be for like 50 more years. That's the way it's going to be. And then this week, Kyle, you're hitting us with just our soundtracks about who God is and what it means to follow Him and how He intersects our lives. And so we can jump in anywhere and all of the above on this idea of soundtracks.
Wow, there's so much there.
Right?
Where
I
to
just
start?
threw it all out there because I'm having tons of conversations around this. Like it's a really helpful, relevant. People are coming up to me. Again, it's helpful for me. I'm listening to myself. It's helpful for Amy and I. The other morning, we got a work thing about someone wanted us to redo their furniture, and so they're sending us an email and pictures. And it's just, without going into details, just kind of a story we've heard before, and it's annoying to Amy because they start a project, can't finish it, they don't start it properly, and then they want someone to kind of jump in and bail them out. So she was annoyed, and she would share this. She doesn't mind me. I hope not, because she's listening. She'll be listening to this at some point. But she was just kind of annoyed. It's a familiar, and we don't know the person, and so she just kind of starts on the rant, right? And I was like, whoa, time out. What are we doing here? Let's change the soundtrack here. Let's be thankful that strangers are emailing us, like, to help them, and if we can serve them in some way. Like, that's what we've been working on for the last 5-6 years. We didn't have people emailing us out of the blue to help us, and she's like, oh, yeah, that's right. You're right. And she was very responsive, and it changed instantly, and it really helped our tone in our conversation, because it's really easy to jump in when someone's going down that road. And you're like, yeah, this kind of feels good. Let's start ranting and let's start raving. It's just, so it was one of those helpful things.
Yeah, because we didn't even talk about that last week. I know we spent some time with the soundtrack of others and different stuff like that. We didn't even dive down the way that manifests in some really harmful and hurtful ways, like gossip and different stuff like that, where you say the soundtrack, right? It doesn't even have to be your soundtrack, but Craig comes to me and says, I can't believe what Scott did today, and he was so rude in that meeting, and the soundtrack that's been repeating in his mind for so long because you offended him or whatever, and instead of dealing with it in a healthy way, then he goes to me, and then I'm like, yeah, hey, Scott was mean to me in a meeting too. He is a jerk, and then we just go.
He's always rude.
Yep, we just go down this rabbit hole, and then next time we sit in a meeting with you, we're mad and we're fuming already, and you haven't even done anything because the soundtrack's just been going, and it affects our perception of you, and then our attitude, and then our behavior, and then maybe the meeting's all weird, and we're gruff, and there's something awkward, and you're oblivious, going like, wait, what the heck is happening? Well, we've just had this soundtrack going in our mind, and we gave life to that thought with words, and then we dwelt on that, and it just got deeper, and the wounds got deeper. Instead of dealing with the offense, we built a fence, and it's just, there's so much there that this soundtrack is understanding the massive power between the repeat, and I talked about it a little bit week 1, like the brain chemistry and the firing of the synapses, and you and I talked about it, I think, not on the podcast, but you can go and Google that and watch video images of some simulated, but some real, where, they put you in the thing. I don't know what they do with an MRI.
MRI.
And they can watch your brain chemistry fire and watch, your brain's like lighting up like a Christmas tree or the 4th of July and these different things. And as you think thoughts, your brain is firing synapses and writing, it's like code on a computer, or these grooves in a record. Your brain is writing, and the powerfulness of that. So the deeper we do that with negative things, the more it affects every area of our life.
And God knows that. He built us. He knows that the power of transformation comes through our thoughts and what we think, and then it has to be coupled with action. And Jesus said that, and that's what I was talking about week 1. Here's the 2 greatest soundtracks and it really is just one soundtrack, is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength, and all of your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so all of your passion, all of your energy for the day, all of your resources and the stuff you have, all of your thinking power to love God and to love others. That's the greatest soundtrack. That should always be on repeat. Should be track one, maybe only track. And we should then, therefore, he goes and talks about the Good Samaritan story is the people who took action. The person who took action is the one who loves God and is a neighbor and loves their neighbor because they took action. Sometimes we get caught up, and I think the misrepresentation and sometimes maybe the bad theology is people like, oh, you just think things and then therefore it manifests and transforms you and does stuff. Well, it starts there, and it starts with our emotions. It's coupled with our feelings about life and our experiences. But God's saying, be renewed by the transforming of your mind. Then you'll know the will of God, and you'll be able to like walk that out on a daily basis. You'll stop on the side of the road, and you'll help the person, and you'll use your resources, all of your heart, soul, strength, and mind to help that person is what Jesus is pointing at. And it's super clear. It's not confusing, and we just need to take action on it.
The transforming of our mind is not just us having a good idea or a wish list of what we want our life to look like, but it's the transformation of our mind or the renewing of our mind, Romans 12, 1 and 2. It is about God's truth, not the truth that I want to be true. It's God's truth. My mind is transformed, and then because my mind is transformed, my life is transformed. When I get God's truth into my heart and into my mind, and I'm looking at life and understanding things according to what is true, not what I might want to be true. And that's what makes it different from positive thinking or mind over matter or whatever it is that other people are into. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about God's truth transforming us and us seeing things the way we should see them and having soundtracks that reflect that truth.
Let's drill down on that a little bit more, because I think that's a very important thing, and it can be a subtle thing for a lot of folks, because a lot of the teaching and preaching and rhetoric, and I've said it plenty of times, is God is for you. Like, if you're with God, He's for you.
He is for us.
But God's not for everything I'm doing, because there's sin out there. God's not pro me doing sin. He's not for me in the sense of approving of my lifestyle, my choices, as a whole, as a blanket. Like, okay, God, you're going to come my way, and what my definition of right and wrong is. I'm going to reference back to Judge Jesus series and High Sounding Nonsense series. Sometimes I think people think, oh, God's going to come my way, and God's going to be over here, and He's going to jump on with what I'm doing because He's for me, not against me. But He's not for everything I'm doing. He's for me. And I think it's an important distinction, because you're like, wait, where's God? Why hasn't He come? No. God's wanting you to go His way every single time. And I think there's some helpfulness there.
Yeah, there is. And I think one of the helpful ways to understand that is you take a family environment. So let's just assume we got healthy parents. They love their kids, got a fairly healthy family environment.
Yeah.
The
Like
parents
my
are for
household.
their kids.
Yeah. Let's just
Like the wonderful environment you grew up in, Scott.
Oh, the one I grew up in.
both
Oh,
of you
okay.
guys.
All right.
Anyway, those parents are for their kids, but they're definitely not for everything their kids are doing.
No.
So that's, I think, a parallel to how God is for us, but as you point out, not for everything. He's not in favor of everything that is part of our life currently.
Yeah.
But the fact that He's for us has to do with Him seeing a much bigger picture than we ever could see. He sees what's going on in our lives right now, but He sees where He's going to get us. He sees where He's going to take us. He sees who we're going to become as we follow Him. And that's the context, I think, the strongest context in which He's for us. He's for who we are now, and He's also for who we're going to become when He's done transforming our lives.
Yeah, because it can slip real quick into a me-centered universe and me-centered world where, yeah, God's for me, and so He's propping up my life, and He's bolstering what I've got going on and my desires and my will. And it's like, oh, no, we forgot about the submit yourself to God part. We forgot that it's His universe. So, God, what are you doing? How do I join you? I'm on your team for salvation. Okay, what does it mean to love you and to love others then? And let me carry that out in the soundtrack where, wait, where's God? Why isn't He coming through? He didn't answer me. He didn't provide for me. Yeah, He might have answered you. He might have said, no, we're not doing this, buddy. This is not good for you.
What we're talking about is really a two-sided coin, and both sides are are true. Both sides are important for us to understand. But if we emphasize one or at the expense of the other, we lose sight of an important balance. I did a pair of messages at a nearby church over the summer, and week one was me just emphasizing how much the Scripture says that God's on my side. He's got me. He's for me. He wants to bless me. There's a ton of Scripture. It's a very easy case to make for that. But then the second week I said, well, now that's one side of the coin. But the other side of the coin is, are you on his side? And I used the passage from Joshua chapter 5 where they're getting ready to go into the promised land. Joshua is a military leader of the nation of Israel. And he's out on patrol, and he encounters someone. And his first question is, are you for us or against us? Friend or foe? Are you an enemy? Should I fight you, or are you an ally? Because he doesn't know, and he probably has drawn his sword at that point. And then the response is no. Because it's the Lord who's appeared in human form to Joshua at this point. We know that from the text. He says, no, I come now as captain of the host of the Lord. And the question, Joshua, isn't whether I'm on your side or not. The question is, Joshua, are you on my side? And so Jesus is for us, but as you're pointing out, our response to that needs to be that we're on Team Jesus. We're on his team just as much, should be on his team just as much as he's on our team, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, and back to the point that you were making, Scott, in that, I mean, we didn't hit this a ton week one because I think most of the time in our relationship with God and in our understanding of our self-identity, we swing the pendulum further. I think as a culture specifically, and as a society today, we talked a lot about anxiety and depression. That we tend to be on that side of the spectrum more than I'm the most amazing gift ever. There is definitely both sides, but I think as a culture and as a whole, we tend to devalue ourselves, not understand our worth, our identity. So I spent more time on that. But the other side of the coin is just as true, is that there's this humility that we talk about that means, one, I understand my giftings. I understand I'm not worthless, that I do have value, and that I have gifts, and that I can give and bring things to the table. And on the other hand, I don't think that life's about me. I don't think all those gifts are making me the best thing in the world, and that you're welcome, I'm here, and all of these types of things. So understanding that appropriate, humble soundtrack in the way that I view myself, and then to the way you guys are fleshing that out even more, the way I view myself in relationship with God and in purpose and a driven life towards something, the more that soundtrack helps me understand who I am, what I do in a healthy way that manages this tension that's really easy to swing the pendulum one side or the other.
I was going to say it's a challenging balance to maintain, because we do tend to go one side or the other and have to make, I think, constant corrections to maintain that balance.
Yeah, and that's where we need others in our lives to help us with that when we're swinging a little too far, because we have a moment where, like, I failed, I'm not doing good, and we have the, Eeyore is our spirit animal, comes out, and we're like, no, I'm no good, I'm no good. So I was talking with someone yesterday, just trying to help them in their faith and growing, and they just had like some serious bad soundtracks. And the way they were talking about it was just like, I'm fighting this thing, and it's overcoming me, and it's always going to overcome me, is basically what they said without verbatim quoting them. And it was just really evident that's where they were. And then in the conversation, they said, like, you guys have been talking about soundtracks, and like, but how do you get rid of the negative thought? Like, he just felt really stuck. He was just like, this is my reality, and it's always going to be my reality, was the tone and the language and the way he structured his sentences. And so maybe we should dive into that a little bit as we identify some of the stuff that's not godly, it's not helpful, it's not true, as we're helping each other, as we are becoming more self-aware. How do we help people when it's like, oh, okay, I see that's a bad soundtrack, but that's just what it is.
Yeah,
it's not changing it.
What immediately comes to mind, or as you were talking, it came to my mind is the truth of Romans 8. I was just looking it up here, what verse it is. It's verse 37 here, if I've got the right one. And it says, in all these things we're more than conquerors. We're exceedingly able to triumph over these things. How? Through him who loved us. In all these things we're more than conquerors. We're more than, in other words, we're not the victim, we're not under, we're over. We're not at the mercy of life circumstances. Paul says in all these things we're more than conquerors. And here's a guy who went through some bad stuff. He was whipped 5 times. He was shipwrecked. He was hungry. He was imprisoned more than once. But he says, I rose above all those things. How? Through him who loves me. It's I did it Sunday. I went through that story of Paul on his way to Rome and how they ended up shipwrecked on an island. And the point that I was hoping to get across is that, life happens to all of us. Circumstances, it's horrible what's going on now in the tornado affected, the devastation there in the Midwest, Tornado Alley, and all the lives that have been lost and the property destruction and disruption of people's lives and stuff. It's horrific. We all go through stuff like that. The difference is whether or not we respond through a lens of God's got me, he can make this work together for good. I'm more than a conqueror, even as bad as this is, I can rise above it. Or this is bad, it's probably going to get worse, this will never be better, I'm a loser, God's probably mad at me, that's why this happened. It's all about the soundtracks with which you respond to life events. And we all experience stuff, good and bad.
Yeah, like the pandemic. There's still some soundtracks hanging around from that.
You think?
That are about life or about others or about myself that are just horrific. And we think, we're just this is the way it's going to be. This is the way it's going to go. And
This is the new normal.
Yeah, and whatever the soundtrack is, we think that's going to be permanent too. What you were going to say something there?
Yeah.
Jump in.
Yeah, I think to your point earlier, like how do we help these people who are saying, hey,
I'm stuck.
This groove is so deep, I can't get the needle out of it, right? This groove is so deep. I've always thought this about myself. There's so much. We talk about addiction and all of these things that are, and so there's obviously varying levels of it, right? I said it. The more you think a thought, the easier it is to think that thought again. So if you've thought this thought your whole life, right? I'm never going to amount to anything. It's every day for 40-some years. And you're like, well, no, I can't not think that thought. It's so deeply ingrained in my mind. So there's, again, varying levels of this. Sometimes it's easier. Week 1, we talked about it, and we've been talking about it every week. Reject it, replace it, repeat it. I think that's a great strategy and form. We reject the negative thought, we replace it with a positive thought, and then we repeat the positive thought. But there's some depth to that if it's this, right?
That's what I'm driving at. Like, what are some of those deeper things to implement?
Yeah,
that?
I think that there's obviously if it's an addiction or something, I think there's different therapy. There's even medication. There's groups like Freedom Ministries and Celebrate Recovery that are specific to maybe porn addiction or whatever it is that have really specific steps that are going to help with that thing that I think are really beneficial. There's so many things across the spectrum that it takes really deep in directed focus on the soundtrack, right? So it's hard to make a blanket statement of, well, if just do this.
Right, and I like to remind people, how did you get where you are? You got there a little bit at a time over the course of, like in the case of this person you're talking about, apparently many years, right? It's so deeply ingrained, and you got there one day at a time, one thought at a time, one experience at a time, one life event that you processed at a time. So it's unrealistic to expect that just with a snap of a finger or a wave of a hand or just do this one thing for 3 days and you'll be awesome. No, it's incremental. You start getting new grooves established, one life experience, one thought process at a time. And I think sometimes people who are stuck like that undervalue the importance and the effectiveness of those little things. Just take a step today in the right direction.
Yeah.
Instead of today thinking, I'm going to just be overwhelmed by this for the rest of my life. Say out loud, no. In all these things, we're more than conquerors. I'm a conqueror through him who loved me. Just hear yourself say that.
Right.
Write that down, put it on the mirror. I know some of those things can become gimmicky and seem kind of silly, but anything you can do to move the needle the other direction is a good thing.
Yeah. But God didn't think that it was gimmicky. He said, talk about them with your kids when you're going through the day.
Yep.
Write them on some doorposts. Put them on your forehead. Put them on
He
your
said you
car
could go
dash.
further than writing it on the mirror. You could write it on your heart. like that.
He
you know,
does.
just get in there.
That was a Jesus juke right
Yeah,
there.
we're going to let him do that. I don't think I should be trying that.
The other thing you did great, you had 61 slides on Sunday, which usually means way
I'm thinking
long.
like, yeah, even
You nailed-
30
An hour and
30
20
seconds a
minutes?
slide. Yeah, I'm like,
Depending on my I'm reading a big section or the stories I want to involve. Like I'm kind of like a minute a slide to estimate, ish.
But just to be clear now, most of those slides had either 2 lines of text or 3,
Right.
because it's that lower third on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's not like 4 verses on a
Pages.
slide. Yeah,
But they're like twice as much as normal week.
it was
Yeah.
way more than I normally do, for sure.
And we had a soundtrack going about Craig during the morning. Like, oh, geez, this is going to be, how is he going to do this? It's
yeah.
not even possible.
Again, I'm just thinking,
Like,
even
just the physics
even at
of
30
it.
seconds a slide, and then you just gotta have
Did
breath in
great.
between.
And it didn't feel rushed either.
No,
That's
and the
other
reality
thing.
is that when I've had half that many slides, I've preached 10 minutes longer.
Twice as long, maybe.
Well, not twice as long.
Because
Come
you
on.
feel the room. You're like, oh, I got time. I got room. I only got a couple more to get
they're,
to.
they're in on this too. Everyone.
No,
Did
I-
great on that.
I landed the plane right
I
on
didn't
time.
say and once. They're loving this, and
I wonder, I wonder what the counter is for me on this podcast.
I got a couple. I gave Craig and I earlier. You were, and I was like,
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
But then I stopped listening.
For sure. There's going to be somebody should be doing little tally marks right now.
No.
So to your point, Craig, of like the everyday building, the habits, changing things, changing my thoughts, coupled with the action, saying it out loud. I think those are super practical steps that we can take. I think we do have to really do the work and go, I'm going to reject it.
Yep.
We don't want to actually reject it at times. You mentioned that on Sunday. You're like, I kind of want to sit in this.
Yep.
I'm a victim. I've been hurt.
We like to indulge ourselves.
I like to
sometimes.
indulge in that. It feels kind of good in a vindictive,
In a weird-
sick, twisted way.
Yep.
Like,
And
I'm
now-
gonna get back at them. I'm gonna hold out, and they're gonna feel what I've felt. And so we're not rejecting it.
And
We're
pulling people
genuine-
into that. I
We're
think.
not only
yeah.
not rejecting it, we're embracing it.
amplifying
We're
it.
hugging it.
digging it down deeper, just graining it in there, like just grinding it in there. And I think now more than ever, we want to bring other people into that. Like, oh, carry my offense with me.
Yeah, so we'll
Sit
put it
in
on
this-
social media
Sit
and see
in
how
this
many-
with me, like, and even like the vague posts, like, oh, you know who you are. I can't believe what you did, and like then people are like, yeah, get them. And then we want people to sit in that
We
with
pile
us
on.
and just it goes deeper and deeper.
And that's what I was having this conversation with the person yesterday was about this whole thing of like they were waiting for this other thing to be this magic cure, and it would fix this, and this issue that they brought up. And they wanted to be more engaged with their family and a better husband and a better leader and a better father. And they thought this other thing was like this magical pill. And I was like, no, if you want that to change, your engagement, like reading the scriptures with your family, something they brought up, I was like, you do that today. You just jump in. And it's not going to fix these other issues. And I even said that, like, what you're looking to is not going to fix this. And they said, yeah, it won't. So why are you keep going on this track? Like, well, I feel stuck. And like, no, you got to reject that. And you got to go, God did not give me a spirit of timidity, of power, love, and a sound mind. I have a mind that has a will and a decision that is holy because the Spirit of God is in me and the fruit of the Spirit is in me and coming out of me, that the power in me is greater than the power that's in the earth, in the world.
Romans 10, I think it's 10, says faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of God. There's a dynamic there that's powerful, and that's not just me listening to a preacher. It's that. I have faith be built up in me. It'll rise up. It'll be strengthened as I listen to someone preaching, proclaiming the truth. But it's also true when I proclaim it, when I hear myself say what's true. It has a way of strengthening my faith. It's like, yeah, that is right. God does love me. I am more than a conqueror.
Yeah.
God didn't give me a spirit of fear. I don't have to be afraid. When I hear myself actually say that stuff, even if I'm all by myself, it's helpful.
Yeah, you did that for us as a community on Sunday, right?
I did.
And somebody I was sitting next to, they leaned over and go, we've done this before. I said, yep.
And if we do it again and again and again, how's that bad?
Right. I don't know where exactly they're coming from, but it's kind of like, wait, this is familiar. Like, but I literally think we've done this exact same verse before, Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of the tone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. We should
Yeah.
keep doing it.
Yeah,
we should do it tomorrow and the next
it goes
day.
from our mouth to our head to our heart and
And
changes
but
our lives.
we're never done with it.
No.
You know, the scriptures and following Jesus it's meditative literature and it's a relational thing. So when can you give up on staying connected to Christ and hearing his voice and being transformed by him? Like if you're following Jesus, you should desire to be transformed by Christ each and every day. And to reject things, to not sit in our own selfishness and jealousy and envy and, you know, evil heart motives. And we have to know what we're saying yes to. So you got to go, I want to say yes to loving Jesus with all of my heart, soul, strength, and mind in the midst of this time. I got to say yes to that. And I can't be saying yes to that when I'm sitting over here in my selfishness, because my wife and I had a fight last week and it was kind of, and it hung out for about 36 hours. And hypothetically, she came to me in the garage one time and was like, "Hey, how are we doing?" And I was just sitting in my own.
When someone says hypothetically, doesn't that mean that it actually happened?
Yeah, no, I mean no. Like when they mention a specific moment and a point and a time.
The further you got in that sentence, I was like, oh, this isn't because we've been
drawing from not real life. Oh, real life. But just choosing.
I know a guy who.
I know a guy once who had a bad soundtrack and just kind of sat in it for a while. And you can't say I love God and hate your brother. It's in John. Like you can't hold both of those things. And so I wasn't hating my wife. So simmer down, anybody who's thinking that. But I just wanted to kind of sit in my own junk for a bit. And I was like, this is not what I want. It's ultimately not what I want in our relationship, in our family. And so choosing different to follow Jesus, to love my wife like I love myself. What are you guys' thoughts? I'm throwing out a bunch of random, not really random, but different big questions here, I think. What do you think Jesus is really getting at when he says, love your neighbor as yourself? And I say it because, or ask it because I think we have a culture of self-indulgence and selfishness, and like it's kind of under the guise of like self-care and take time for yourself. But it's really a selfish motive and a selfish heart. And so you're like, I'm just loving the people like I would love myself, and I need more self-time and more me time and more selfishness time. I think it's confusing on what Jesus is driving at when he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And like, Kyle, to love God and others, you got to love yourself first. And I don't hear Jesus saying, love yourself first. Because I think that's coming from, for most of the time, for most people, it's coming from a selfish in me-centered life and universe, and it's not God and others-centered life and universe. Jesus didn't say, go love yourself first. How clear was that rambling and question there?
I got it, and then you kept going. There might have been a few and-ums in there as you kept going.
See how that's my... I fully on, like, full well... I don't even know what I'm saying right now.
Are you done?
No.
Just stop for a second. I'll give you some time to think.
I like to process out loud.
I appreciate that. The first thing that I think of is our propensity, our just natural way to think about our own needs. Like, you don't have to teach someone to be, like, in self-preservation. Like, we will do what we need to do to survive because we need to survive. We need, warmth and shelter and whatever, and we'll do what it takes. And so I think a lot of times when Jesus talks about love, love is choosing the best for somebody. Love is choosing to put somebody first. And we do that naturally with ourselves. I want to make sure I'm going to go to bed and wake up tomorrow. I need to eat so I have fuel for my body. I need to, if this hurts, I'm going to do something different to make sure this doesn't hurt. And if, that's just natural. You don't have to think about that or work really hard to be like, hey, you should try to be alive better, right? Like, we just do that. And so I think a lot of, first, it's really deep, so there's lots of layers to it. But first and foremost, it's look out for the needs of others the way that you naturally do for yourself. You think about yourself a lot. And look out for the needs of others the way I built you to do that for yourself. Jesus built us to know those things naturally and to breathe without thinking about it and all these things. Do that for others. Look out for their needs.
No, I think that's a great starting point. I think that's the foundational. How did you say it? Do you remember? Can you say it again?
I said just look out for the needs of others the way you naturally look out for your own needs.
Yeah, I think that's primarily what Jesus is driving at, is like when you're hungry, you go to the kitchen, start eating, and And then sometimes we have the, oh, hey, did you want something? Are you hungry too? And it's secondarily we're thinking about others. Where Jesus is saying, oh, yeah, do that for others, like, but up front and first, and not just your own interests. Like, hey, I'm making a sandwich. Do you want one too? Because you probably are hungry.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's well said. And Paul says something very similar to that in Philippians chapter 2. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. And another translation will emphasize the fact, not looking to your own interests only, but also to the interests of others. It's that. I'm hungry and I need something to eat, and I'll bet that guy does too, right? It's not just about me, but it's recognizing that the things that I do that are right and healthy to take care of the needs I have are things I can maybe help the next person with. And I think you're right. He didn't say love your neighbor as yourself, and to do that you have to love yourself first. There isn't that caveat to it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I think what he's also driving at there, the Lord is saying, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and not as you indulge yourself, or as you cater to yourself, or as you make yourself in some selfish way the most important thing. No, loving yourself is saying, hey, self, it's not all about you. Hey, self, you don't need to go overboard with that. Hey, self, it's not love your neighbor as you indulge yourself. It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. And when I love myself, it's not me doing stuff out of selfishness or out of self-indulgence or whatever the case might be. If I really am loving myself, then I'm doing the things that are good for me. And that might require a little discipline and maybe actually saying no to myself.
Yeah, and one of the good things for us is serving others. And there's something that's good for us. That can only happen as we serve others that is helpful for us that we can't get anywhere else. You can't do enough self-indulgence and quote-unquote self-care when it's all about you. Like when you give to others, there's a blessing and there's something that is good for our soul and our spirit.
It develops character.
And our heart and our mind.
Maturity.
That only happens as giving to others.
I agree. I've said it for years. It's so true.
I got them a gift and I got me one too because I'll feel better about myself. It takes away from it. And I don't understand it all, but I just know Jesus said it's better to give than to receive, and serving others is the purpose. Not to the unhealthy detriment of sacrificing our own, taking care of ourselves. If you're running so ragged that your family falls apart because you're quote unquote serving others, you're not following Jesus properly.
You're not loving yourself. Actually, you're hurting yourself.
Well, and you're hurting your family, and you're like, okay, my kids get the boot because I got to go care for all these other people, and
yeah, that's a good
take
point.
care of your own household first, or you're worse than an unbeliever.
Exactly.
What the Scripture says.
You mentioned self-care earlier, and it sounded a little bit like you might be suggesting that self-care is a bad thing. No, actually, there is some of it that goes way too far.
In the vein I was talking about, whereas
in our culture,
it's an excuse to not serve others, and it's this self-indulgence thing, and it's escapism.
Right.
And so,
yes. And I understood that that's what you were saying, but I just wanted to circle back to that because there's a healthy place, a right place for self-care. Jesus practiced self-care. He'd get up early in the morning and go out to a place by himself.
Play a round of golf.
And spend time with his Father.
Oh, okay, so he's praying and reading the Scriptures for self-care.
Because he knows that he needs that. It's kind of like, what they say in the airplane, put your own air mask on first and then that of your child, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to help your child.
What if you're Jesus? Do you think he would have needed an air mask?
Yes.
Full humanity.
I don't think Jesus would have been flying on a plane because he wouldn't need a plane to get from point A to point B.
Just throwing it out there. Like,
but I mean,
I've
I've
always
always
transcended some, natural law stuff while he was here. So he could have went around and maybe helped everyone first.
No, he still had lungs that needed to fill with air as a human.
I don't know. He had remember the transfiguration moment?
Yeah.
I mean,
Was
there was some
Jesus after the resurrection or
supernatural.
before?
No, this is before. After all
saying
bets
this
are
is
off.
Remember
at
that walk
point.
on water part? Like he
Yeah.
defied some of those natural laws.
For
So
sure.
breathing air for a few minutes might be possible.
Okay, man.
Throwing
that's
it
a
out
good
there.
debate. Anyway, something I've always said, and I think that this kind of wraps it back up with the self-care. I've always said to people about this idea of serving others, you can't pour out of a cup that's empty, right? And you can't pour out your life without filling it up. And so there's a huge part of that in your relationship with God, seeking Him, spending time with Him, taking care of your needs. Yeah, working, all the time because for a good cause. And it's really easy for the guys on this podcast and sitting in these couches to go, for me to go, yeah, I'm working extra hours for the kingdom of God. My pastor job is super important, but now I'm tired and I'm not spending time with my wife and I'm not giving, time to my emotional needs and all these kind of stuff. But it's for Jesus. And you mentioned it. We sacrifice these things on the altar of serving people or the church, and then it's like, yeah, my kids hate me, and my wife, has left me or whatever it is, or my friends are. I'm an alcoholic and I'm watching porn and all this kind of stuff because I'm working too hard and I didn't take care of myself and my own needs, my own health, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
So there's a balance to be maintained there, of course.
Yeah, as a culture, we've swung it too far, and it's getting promoted for consumerism to sell products and services for people to take care of yourself. Nobody's taking care of themselves enough. Yeah, no, time out. Yeah, there are a ton of people taking care of themselves properly. Having margin is what we're talking about. Saying no to things, not finding our identity and value in work and success. That is a large part of it. Settling in to know who I am in Christ and being okay to I shut it down. Time off, clocked it out. I don't have to feel like I got to keep being successful at work. And I'm on a bit of a rant today. I don't even know why. There's just stuff rolling around, and I don't come in with all this stuff prepared, but there's too much of a soundtrack of I'm so busy, man. We've just been slammed. We've been busy, and it is so connected to people feeling valuable and that they're worth something because of their schedule is so jam-packed. And if you were to slow down and you have a day off, it feels so weird and you feel kind of worthless when you take time for rest in a normal rhythm. That is an alarm going off that something is wrong.
You know what it is? I just realized it. You know what it is?
I feel that at times.
You know what it is? It's
I feel
because
unproductive. Did I say Ando? I'm just going to keep going. No, go ahead.
This isn't really that serious. It's because you haven't golfed enough lately. Because you haven't had that.
Dear Lord.
That rest relationship on the golf course.
Amen.
That's what I'm feeling. So.
Did you give me a Christmas present? Are we taking a trip?
No.
Are we going somewhere warm and sunny, playing around?
I wish. I would love you the way I love myself and giving you a trip to Hawaii to play some golf.
And that's what Jesus was talking about. We have solved it. This is true. I need some self-care, Craig. I need a good 18 holes.
Okay, whatever you say.
Yeah, he's just shaking his head. But I don't even remember exactly where I was. But
I
think the foreignness of slowing down and people's I'm busy. I got this soundtrack. How are you doing? We've been running. We've been busy. There's seasons of that, but it is a sneaky way for the enemy to get our value and our identity as a person into our stuff.
I'm actually dealing with that now as I'm going into retirement. I'm realizing, okay, how much of my value and self-worth and purpose was tied into the things that I did for a job as a lead pastor. Do I still have the value that I've always had? And why am I feeling some of the things I'm feeling? I was talking to somebody just yesterday, a group of pastors that we got together, and he said, how you doing with that? And I said, well, actually, retirement's an adjustment for me, just psychologically and emotionally. I'm enjoying the fact that I don't have the responsibility and the freedom that I have in my schedule and all that. There's lots of pluses, but there's still an adjustment because of the thing that you're putting your finger on there that for decades I understood who I was by what I did in a lot of ways, and I knew better, but that still is easy to do. It's just my value is tied in with what I do. I serve Jesus and then lead this church and whatever, and so I'm having to sort that out, and that's good for me.
And then beyond that, I mean, for you, for me, it's it's weekly, but it's seasonally, right? I did really good at it this week. Lots of people told me that message I spoke was good, so it raises. And the next week is I kind of bombed. I didn't get across what I wanted to, right? And or seasonally at work, we're really busy this quarter is up and to the right, and so then we feel really good, and this value in our identity and our soundtrack is there because but this quarter we took a hit. It's rough, and maybe I didn't work hard enough. Or I took a vacation, and now I feel this guilt because I took a vacation with my family, and then third quarter earnings were down. Oh no, right? Or whatever it is, the attendance at church or the offering or small group. Like nobody's coming to Fusion. Whatever it is, these seasons of we can let that again our identity and then our worth and our value ebb and flow with that in a really dangerous way. And then under the guise of self-care, messes with that even more.
Then it blows up, and we're burnt, and then we're like, I need some time to myself, and I need some self-care, and I'm going to escape. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to go a day by myself. I'm going to go weekend. We got to get away. We got to, right? Because it's this, Jesus said, love your neighbors, you love yourself. I'm not loving myself enough. I got to get away. It's like, no, you need to have rest. Jesus worked 6 days, took a rest day.
Yeah.
We don't think about that.
There's a healthy place for self-care and margin in our life, all that stuff, for sure. But Jesus said, if you're not willing to deny yourself and take up your cross, you're not worthy to be my disciple.
Bingo.
There's a place for self-denial, a place for self-sacrifice, a place for us just bucking it up.
It is the way of following Jesus to go, my life is not my own.
So again, there's a tension there, but
we don't
needs to be balanced.
always think about this. The Savior of the world, who was busy full time preaching the good news, traveling around city to city, he took an entire rest day every single week because he was a Jew and he grew up as a Jew, right? And so Friday, right? I'm looking at you guys like, oh no, like oh. So Friday at sunset, everything was shut down, and you couldn't do any work until Saturday evening. That was their normal week.
Except on occasion, he did what the Pharisees thought was work. He would heal somebody, and they would give him the third degree for it.
Right? And then he's bringing up the point of like, listen, man wasn't built to like follow these laws. The laws were to help us govern our lives to follow the way of God. And so, yeah. They walk through a field, they pick some grain, and then they're eating it, and they're like, they worked. They shelled wheat. Anywho, so we got to land this plane here. Any other final thoughts or things you guys wanted to
we're talking
cover
about
before we land it?
soundtracks. And I think, back to your conversation you had with this person recently that you're trying to help them get unstuck. I want to circle back around to Revelation chapter 12, verse 11. Verse 10, actually. It's a wonderful little passage. It says, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. That's the devil. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. So it's how do they have victory? How do they overcome this enemy of their soul who accuses them before God day and night? I don't even understand fully what that means. That's just mind-blowing to think that our enemy's up there just bad-mouthing us constantly, right? But he's been hurled down, and we triumph over him ourselves by the blood of the Lamb, appealing to what Jesus did on our behalf. In Christ, we have all these benefits and blessings. And by the word of their testimony. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. When we say it out loud, there's power in that. When we tell our story, when we repeat the truth of God's word, when we declare the things that we know to be true about who God is, who he wants to be in our life, what our life is, who we are to him, those are powerful things. Our words have power to help us overcome the stuff that we struggle with, the bad soundtracks.
Yep. And that's what I told him I was going to do. I was like, I'll just follow up with you on an email on a few of these. I just wanted to, I said, so you have it in writing, and I'm just going to go to BibleGateway.com, copy and paste a few of the scriptures and help him reject that stuff and replace it with the truth and keep saying that. So, we're landing this plane for Christmas, and we'll be off for a couple weeks back in the new year with a guest. And
when we're back in the new year with the guest, will we have an announcement on the winners of the Olympics? The Langhans Olympics. That's what you should call it.
Olympics?
It's the family Olympics.
It should be the Langhans Olympics.
It probably depends on who wins. If we both lose, we may not want to talk about it.
Okay.
If one of us wins, we for sure will be talking about it.
Hey, speaking of soundtracks in the Olympics.
I don't know if you know about the braggadociousness.
So just Sunday at the party, somebody was talking to me about the Olympics, and I said, yes, we got just a couple more weeks, Cindy and I do with bragging rights because we've been the defending champions all year. And then I said, but it can only go down from there. he looked at me and goes, "Is that your soundtrack?"
Oh man.
He like pulled me up short. It's like,
Right.
"Oh, wait a minute. No, I didn't mean that. I
Yeah.
meant, no, we're going
Two-time
to
champion is
triumph
better,
again
yeah.
2 years in a row." I realized, no, I got a soundtrack that's anticipating the worst.
Yep.
That's good news for you. That soundtrack.
Well, yeah,
That
the
he's-
bad news is
he's
I
alre-
realized
I'm
it before the Olympics.
I'm already up in your head. That's what we say, right? Like you
Yep.
get over a putt in golf and you're like, oh, I'm gonna miss this. This is gonna be short. I'm gonna underneath. Like
That literally used to be my putting routine. My timing, make this putt, make this putt, make this putt.
In your
See?
head. You're,
Yeah. I'm
seriously, you're saying
yeah?
that?
Yeah.
Because there's a psychological thing. You walk up like, this is a makeable putt. Already in my mind, I'm like, oh man, this is a difficult putt. Hopefully I get it close.
oh, there's no way this goes in. It breaks so hard here and double breaks and
Lots
yeah,
of-
we
So
just
like
do
I
that
said,
all
Cindy and I
throughout life.
can win again.
You got it.
And we will.
Two-time champs.
Yeah.
Make this putt.
Because it wasn't a fluke, and people ask us all the time. You guys went soft on him, right? You guys kind
No,
of.
you did not.
You
guys
let him win. I mean, he's
ease up.
retiring. You know,
I was
you
like,
wanted him to have some.
I am offended. Do you not know me? I do not
Have
ease
you
up.
met me?
Well, and Ben and Amanda for sure. I mean,
Nobody eases up,
I remember Ben. He was just like, "No, that can't be true," and he kept doing the numbers and the math. It's like,
right?
what?
Except for Jeremy, he'll be
What?
like, "I quit. I'm gonna be done." We know when he eases up. He's like, "I'm done. I don't want to play no."
Well, that wasn't about
Yeah.
letting us win. That was
No,
just
he's like,
because he
"I'm
was
so
done."
behind.
I'm
I just-
I'm
this
gonna
is
go get another
ridiculous.
cup of coffee. I'm
I'm-
good.
I'm out.
Chill.
Yeah.
So, new year, new guest, and we will have a maybe defending champ or a new champ to crown.
Right. And if you have any thoughts on content as we help us this next year, if you got some ideas, you're like, hey, I'd love for you guys to dissect and talk about this topic or this section of scripture, those kind of things, feel free to hit us up, let us know, and we'll have a great Christmas. I hope you enjoy your time with family, friends, celebrating God and who He is in our lives, and have a wonderful holiday season following Jesus. We'll see you in 2022.